Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting of the Law Committee?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Okay, roll call, Wendy,
Yes.
Bob Romer,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Stan?
Yes.
I'm a yes also. All right, thank you, Wendy, Bob, for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
Thank you.
This is the Bolton Select Board meeting for October 26, 2023. We are starting the meeting late due to some technical difficulties during an executive session held prior to this meeting in conjunction with the Law Committee. Now we are returning to regular open meeting with the Select Board. First up is a motion to a vote to approve the conservation restriction from Richard Merrill and Margie Merrill to the Bolton Conservation Trust in the public interest pursuant to section 32 of chapter 184 of the Massachusetts General Laws. Were we expecting anybody else, Don, to speak to this?
We were, but I don't see him in the waiting room. I did send him the new link, but he hasn't written back to me as of yet.
I don't know if it's appropriate to proceed, or Don, or should we put this on the table
If
till?
there are no questions, I think it's completely appropriate to proceed.
All right. Are there any questions or comments from Stan or Brian?
Nope.
Nope.
Okay. Could I have a motion to approve the conservation restriction?
I'll approve, make a motion to approve the conservation restriction.
Second that.
Okay, roll call, Brian,
Yes.
Stan,
Yes.
and I'm a yes also. All right, next is the town administrator report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. As a follow-up to a question that was raised a couple of meetings ago, I was asked to reach out to the superintendent of schools to seek input on increases in operating expenses in previous high school projects that Skanska had worked on. The superintendent in turn forwarded the question to the chair of the building committee, Joseph Gleason. Mr. Gleason sent us an email that I believe you all have, referencing 5 high school projects that, in his words, the owner's project manager would refer the Bolton Select Board to the following projects for securing the requested information. Those projects being Minuteman Regional Vocational High School, Attleboro High School, Winchester High School, Winthrop Middle School / High School, and Somerset Berkeley Regional High School. So that is the official response that we have gotten to the request. And that is all the information I have on that at this time. And as far as questions regarding the overall increase in or projected operating expenses for the new high school, in the monthly meeting that the 3 TAs had with the Superintendent Downing on Monday, I believe it was. I asked a follow-up question that was asked at our special town meeting, which was, is the plan still to keep the head count flat in the new high school as opposed to the current high school? And the answer was yes. So not projecting increase in teaching staff at this time. So that is all the information I have on that subject.
After that email came about from the chairman of the school committee, I thought that it didn't really answer the question that we were trying to get answered. So I reached out to Joe Gleason, who's chairman of the committee, and I asked him to just make a phone call to the Skanska project manager, just to address the simple question of, do you have that information? Does Skanska collect that information about operating costs after the school is open? And the answer is no. Once they have project closeout, Skanska no longer has contact or collects any of that information. So that, I think, is the more complete answer than the one we got in the email.
And that makes
Well,
sense. That's not something I would expect a owner's project manager would collect.
Well, somebody needs to be able to provide that answer. So someone needs to be able to provide that answer, because this is real money that the three towns are going to have to spend if the operating cost of the new building is more than the operating costs of the existing building. We're already sitting on $241 million of costs, plus another at the very least, another $133 million in interest. Somebody needs to be looking at it. Are the operating costs of that building going to be more or less? Because if it's less, that's great. If it's more, then we need to be prepared for that. And I don't see that that's an acceptable answer, that we need to go off and hunt it ourselves. Somebody needs to provide that number to us, the three towns. I'm sorry. Even if it's a rough guesstimate, but somebody needs to provide that.
How would you suggest that be done?
Well, somebody on the building committee, someone at the project manager, someone who's building the buildings, someone needs to go back and find out the buildings that they built. Skanska did 13 or 14 high schools in Massachusetts. Somebody needs to find this out. It's not our job to figure out how they need to find this out. They need to find this out for us. It's an important question, Bob.
All right, well, should we ask Don to prepare a request for proposal to have one of those firms do that kind of survey?
We should be getting that information from the district. The district wants a new school. They should be able to tell us, and they're the ones that need to figure this out. Not we need to do a request for proposal.
Okay, Brian?
They need to provide the three towns this information.
Sorry, it's very noisy in the airport right now, so I hope you can hear me. I guess question for you, Stan. Could you just, like at a high level, paint a picture of exactly what you would consider satisfactory information in response? Like, would you want those schools that were provided as examples to say, in year A, which was before the project was completed, our operating costs were this, and in year B, after it was completed, they were that? Like, what is the exact comparison you want?
At a very high level, okay, of all the schools that Skanska was involved in Massachusetts, they should be able to figure out, or they should be able to get from those schools and those districts and those communities. Okay, the operating costs for those buildings were X per year, just before the building was demolished. And now that they've built a new school, okay, the operating costs for electric, heat, everything else, and I'm not talking about teachers. I mean, I think we got a cute answer from Downing that, okay, we're not going to increase the teacher, but that's not operating costs. I'm talking about the operational costs of the building. And what were the operational costs for the replacement school that was built? And it's either going to be the same, it's going to be less, or it's going to be more. And there's going to be potentially a percentage increase, decrease, or nothing. So if nothing else, then we go back and we say, okay, the operational costs for the Neshoba Regional High School this year were X, Y, and Z. And they can serve up the cost for electric, heat, this, that, the other thing, oil, whatever, all the operational costs of the building. And okay, then they can look at an average of the deltas of the new buildings, of all the other buildings that were built by Skanska, and say, okay, if it was $10 and the operational costs are now 25% more or 25% less, we can figure out what those numbers are based upon what the operational costs of the existing facility that we have in Bolton.
And
I think that's a reasonable request to make.
so then my
Because-
next question though is like in terms of the timing of when we would want that, it seems to me that it may not actually be that valuable for us to have it now versus closer to when the new school is actually coming online. Because if the whole point of this is to be able to make projections about how much we need to be preparing to spend, we like our before and after numbers are going to be off until we're actually at the point where we're approaching our own before and after, and we're still several years out from that. Am I right?
Well, but Brian, if the trend is that the new building is X% less, that's great. But if the trend is for the 13 or 14 schools that they've built, and the trend is it's going to cost 10 or 15 or 20% more, we ought to know that now to plan
What would you
for
do with that
how-
information, Stan? What would you do with that information? If you had
do you
it,
mean?
what would you do with it?
Because we're going to need to know what the impact is on the budget, because that's
You don't know
going
what
to
the
directly
town's budget is going to be 5 years from now.
5 years. So the school is going to be built in the next couple of years, Bob.
2028
Isn't it?
is moving.
Okay, well then then we already know that we're going to get hit with 241 million plus the interest, and we have to pass that down to the taxpayers. What's the problem in getting some insight as to what that's going to be on top of all this other stuff? What's
Because
the problem?
there's nothing you can do with that information.
Other than be prepared for it. What's the problem with knowing it?
Would you prepare for it?
What is the problem with knowing?
what does
what is
being
the
prepared
problem
for
with
it
knowing
mean?
that information, Bob?
No,
What is the
tell me what
problem
you're
with
going to
knowing
do
that
with it.
information?
What does being prepared mean?
You know, Bob, you seem to be totally consumed with everything for the school. Let's not upset everything that's going on with the school. Why is knowing an additional number? We already know what it's going to cost to build the thing. We already know what the minimum interest is going to be. Why is it a problem to have some insight as to what the potential operating costs are going to be on top of all of this other stuff?
Dan,
Just
why
to have
haven't
it
you
as
asked that
record?
question about
What's the
town
problem?
expenses? Why isn't it
What-
important to do that for town expenses? And why haven't you been asking that question about town expenses?
Let me just jump in with a potential next step, which is that I don't see, sorry, it's so loud. I don't see any harm in my raising this issue at a future meeting of the Budget and Warrant Subcommittee, just to sort of say like, listen, it's going to be coming online in 2028. I'm sure your group is going to want, as you get closer to that, to be able to project what the impact on the operating costs are. And so we can just talk through it and I can find out whether it's on their radar. I think that's a decent first step.
If you're willing to do that, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I'm happy
You
to
go
do that.
right ahead. You go right ahead, Brian, and you see if you can get that. That's great. You go do that.
Okay.
And let us know how successful you are at the future meeting.
Okay. Next on the town administrator report was an update and program review of Hometown Heroes.
Yes, I mean, I talked about it previously, but since it will be taking place before our next select board meeting. Again, it is taking place Saturday, November 11th, 2023, 11:30 a.m. to 1:30 a.m. And it's a luncheon and banner dedication to honor our hometown heroes. There are two pieces to it. The motorcade will depart from Slater's at 11 a.m. And make its way to Trinity Church, where there will be a luncheon and a speaking program. And I have confirmed that among other dignitaries, both Representative Hogan and Senator Kennedy will be attending. It's my honor to be the master of ceremonies for the event. The select board are invited to attend. If you could let us know if any of you can make it, that would be great. And I've been to, I think, all of these in the past since Hometown Heroes started, and it's always a very it's just a nice event to honor and thank our veterans. And the people who are leading the effort, there's a lot of people working on this, but the leading organizers are Leslie Case, Karen Regan, and Linda Day, and they're working incredibly hard on this. And I just wanted to make sure that people are aware of that. So please let me know if any of you can make it. And just one last thing, not on the agenda. This is just informational, but I think I believe I've mentioned either in maybe not at a board meeting, but at least in email form, that I did resubmit in August all of the information necessary to DOT to seek our speed limit be lowered from 30 to 25 townwide in any thickly settled areas. And I've had confirmed today that DOT has accepted that documentation. They have approved that. So now the next steps are, we'll be working on acquiring the signage and agreeing on placement. We'll probably seek board guidance on placement because there are a couple of different ways to do it. But that's a topic for the next meeting because it's not on the agenda for tonight. But I'm very pleased that we were able to get that sign off from DOT.
Very good. Thank you.
And unless you have any questions, that's all I have for this evening.
No, okay. Are there any public service announcements?
Nope.
No, okay. Any future agenda items proposed?
Nope.
Okay. Discuss next steps on town administrator search. Don, why don't you bring us up to date on what's transpired since our last meeting?
What has transpired from our last meeting is that we have received 2 statements of interest from residents who would like to serve on the screening committee. The board at the previous meeting said you were going to be seeking 2 residents. We received a statement of interest from Penny Gherkin and a statement of interest from Lorraine Ramasco. So 2 highly qualified people right there. We have also received an informational packet. So it is more than informational. It's a packet from John Petrin, Bolton resident John Petrin, who works for Community Paradigm, which is owned by Bernie Lynch, former town manager, city manager, very experienced individual. It gave the board, I think it gives the board a taste for what you're looking at for activities in a search. I thought it was very well done. I do know Community Paradigm does approximately about 60% of all searches in the state, and they've got a very good staff. So that's the outreach, or that's the new information that we've received since the last meeting.
Okay. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I had a question. First of all, I'll say that the the memo that Mr. Petrin provided from Community Paradigm Associates was really helpful. On the table that talks about projected timeline, it talks about, you know, contract award. So I guess my question is it a best practice to basically go out and do some sort of an RFP for this search process? Is that part of the implication there?
Is that question posed to me, Brian?
Yeah, you or Mr. Petrin, yeah.
It's my experience that it's fairly common. I would say, based on my anecdotal observations, that it's probably 50-50. The procurement wise, it's not required to go out to do an RFP. If you do an RFP, it does take longer, obviously, and from what I have observed, it tends to increase the price because then companies need to put the work into an RFP to respond to. There's more work to be done. It is not a procurement requirement. I don't know. I can't honestly say what the best practice is here because I think it's pretty split between towns about how they do this. For example, not every town does a screening committee to begin with. So that's not a standard practice anymore either, as it was at one time. So it's what works for an individual town.
Don, I'm not sure what the custom is among town managers in this regard, so I'm asking this question. But if we want someone to start July 1st, what's the appropriate time at which they should be giving their notice to their current employer?
That the variable there is what's in their contract. Most of us are contractually obligated to provide a minimum amount of time. I haven't read my contract in years, but I suspect that in mine, it's probably something like 60 days would probably be the minimum. Those of us who, have had a good relationship with the town would want to do at least that. So I would say if you're looking, again, my opinion, I could be wrong. It depends on when would you like to see someone start here? And then back up at least 60 days from there, from when you've negotiated a contract and they've accepted. And then there's all the process that precedes that. So that's not a direct answer because there are variables, but I think that's fairly, and the other thing you have to consider is what, if any, overlap do you want? When do you want, if my last day is June 30th, do you want 1 day's overlap? Do you want 1 week's overlap? So there are factors, and a consultant can help you determine that. A good consultant can walk you through all that.
So for someone to start on July 1st, just for purposes of discussion here, if they give 60 days notice, they need to give notice the last day of April. If you back up from there for contract negotiations and things like that, we need to be all settled in with we need to be settled in with our final candidate by April 15th. Now, if they have more than 90 days, more than 60 days, then, we all that advances a month more. But, I think we need to have a decision about at least a couple of candidates and the ranking by sometime around April 1st, if we're going to assume that other town managers have a 60-day notice requirement. Does that seem reasonable to? So with that in mind, how would you like to proceed, Stan and Brian?
So
I would
Oh, sorry, go ahead,
suggest
Stan.
we get I'm happy. I know John Petrin, I know his firm. I'm happy to engage them. We've done this before, so got Don, and so we'll follow the same process, and we managed to do it the last time. I think we'll manage to do it this time.
So if we build in the 14 or so weeks in the timeline, with week 14 ending around the beginning of April, we really need to be moving on this by December or the very beginning of January.
Yeah,
Right.
the sooner the better. The
Yep.
sooner the better.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. And the only other sort of process question I have is it, I know we have this screening committee that's being formed. In terms of sequencing, is it typical for the consultant to be basically brought in by the select board before that screening committee's first meeting because you do some prep work? I think that sort of seemed to be implied by the timeline.
We definitely want the consultant there to give the to do the meeting, the kickoff meeting with the screening committee to set their charge, so they understand their role. Also gives the screening committee the ability to vote their chair, but really it's a procedural thing. It's really important that the consultant explain to the screening committee what their role is, what their role isn't, what the do's and don'ts are. But John is in the audience. I'm speaking when I should be letting him speak, actually. So John, I'm going to stop talking.
Oh, thank you, Don, and thank you to the board for allowing. And I was waiting to. I was observing until this point, but I'll be glad to step in. First of all, congratulations to Don and his notice of retirement. I've issued him congratulations in person, prior to, and I was actually at your last at the board meeting in which he made the announcement. So the process takes time. So even though there's a 14-week time period and everything's slower, especially with the screening committee, because getting people together is very difficult, especially with 9 members on a screening committee. We find getting schedules down, and you're going to be working, through the holidays as well, so difficult season within there. So, so we have the experience of doing this. So our firm has done, we do about 60%, of the searches, in the state. And personally, I've been involved in several of the searches in area communities, in the Bolton area. I think one of the things is, the other thing is that, with our firm and with me in particular, I bring a small town feel, to the situation. Having worked for the town of Harvard right next door for 13 years, I understand a small town of 5,000. So we'll definitely work with the screening committee and guide them through the process. I think the whole key here is that we're a facilitator, so we're not choosing your next town administrator, but the other side of it is we're the recruiter. So one of the things we do well in our firm is actually contact people, make the phone calls. Don can testify that every time a search goes out from our firm, every manager in the state receives an email about it. And so we go out and we work with folks. And so those are just some of the, key points there. But you're going to be talking about, you can back it up to, 60 days. It could be 90 days. And then prior to that, you could have maybe a 1-month negotiation period, with getting that final candidate. And if there's a hiccup in that period, you need a few more, you need a little bit more time within there. So you're going to be just in time, to probably hit, the July 1 turnover, at this point in time. So that's why I say Don's given you sufficient time, but there's not a lot of time to waste. And so I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the board tonight. We did submit, the outline of the way a search works, and the way we do searches. And we do it a little bit differently from other firms, but you can certainly check. We've provided the list of communities that we've been involved with. And you can do backgrounds on us on that, but I think we have a solid reputation. And we'll be using several people, as part of this. So I'll be the lead person here, but we'll have Bernie Lynch as the principal. And the other thing our firm brings is with Sharon Flaherty. Sharon's a communications expert. So she's been with the firm since the beginning. And Sharon was a journalist, an editor, and worked in the private sector on public relations and communications. So we bring that to the table, from our firm, as to what's going on. So again, the decision is up to you folks as to which way. I fully understand whichever way you go. We work with a lot of screening committees. So we're used to the concept, and we tend to work well, I think, with the screening committees and with the boards in the end. So I'll answer any questions you may have, as to the process.
Yeah, do you have a question, Brian?
It's a timing thing, so go ahead.
Well, go ahead. Yours is probably a little more pertinent than mine. Mine's a general statement.
Sure. So based on the minutes of our last meeting, we were planning to close the period for volunteers on November 30th, and then appoint the search committee December 14th. I'm just wondering if that actually may be a little too late. Like, would you suggest to us that if we could do it sooner than that, we should maybe revise that?
No, you'll be fine with that from my perspective, because the screening committee will basically meet 4 times. We'll do an orientation meeting prior to when we get going. Then we'll meet one time when all the candidates are submitted. We'll review all the candidates, and then you need 2 meetings basically for interviews. So you've got plenty of time on that end with the screening committee, because what we'll do between, for the first basically month or so is putting together a position statement. So we meet with each of the members of the board. We meet with staff members. We'll meet with department heads and talk about what are the needs of the town. We want you to identify what you're seeking in the next town administrator. And so we'll work with you on that. So there's plenty of time to get that. So I think a December 1 timeframe is plenty of time for your screening committee to be put together.
Then one last question from me, which is just, what is a rough sense of the magnitude of the cost of a search?
So in this case, $9,900 for the search. And the only cost on top of that is the advertising cost. So the cost for the beacon or putting it on the MMA, it's not in the beacon these days, but the MMA website. So that cost is the only additional cost. All the other costs are absorbed within the price.
Thank you.
So my general statement or question is, the next town administrator, we hope, will be in place for a long time. And strictly from a sense of optics, is there something to be gained by putting this out to bid, putting out the consultant position to bid? That's my question to Stan and Brian.
I see no reason, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, so having looked at the roster of the people that are involved in the proposal that we've seen, like I'm familiar with obviously Mr. Petrin and Julie Jacobson, and it seems like given that they do 60% of the searches, I feel pretty comfortable going in this direction. And honestly, if I were to opine on the optics, it would just be a random guess, because I have no data to suggest that doing an RFP contributes to the optics in one way or another. I just don't know.
Okay, just wanted to ask the question. I'll go along with the consensus here. So what does the board need to do for next steps, Don?
I suggest that the board vote to ask Mr. Petron to submit a contract to the town for your review at the next meeting and presumably vote to approve and sign. Without a signed contract, you really can't proceed.
Right.
So I think that should be the next step.
Have we announced the search committee formally? Have we put out a notice that we're looking for members?
We did not. I actually had that conversation with you a few days ago, and I said that we couldn't really do that a notice in the paper because we didn't know what timeline we were looking at. We didn't know what time commitment we were looking at, so we couldn't put the structure together that the questions that people are gonna, that we believe people would ask. So
Okay.
we need that from the board also. And I was wondering if, again, once you have a consultant advising you, I think that expertise helps set the expectation for the screening committee.
Yeah, I would leave it up to the committee to decide how often it wants to meet. I don't think the select board needs to get involved in that.
So we
But
could
that's-
say,
that's
we
my
could say we
opinion.
anticipate the first meeting being, generally speaking, on this date, with the goal of the process being completed by this date. So we would just need a little structure like that. I think maybe John would disagree.
Yeah, I would hope the first meeting would be the first full week in January. And the target end date is April 1st.
Mr. Chair, I think Jenny had a question.
I'm sorry, Jenny.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we are not planning to sign a contract until the next meeting, which I think is November 16th. And we have a deadline for volunteers at the end of November. That's a really short turnaround for getting people in the door. So I don't know if it's feasible to get the contract signed outside of the parameters of a meeting or have a separate or schedule a meeting to review the contract outside of our typical schedule. Or if Mr. Petron would be willing to provide some language outside of a contract that could be used for that advertisement and that I can use to go ahead and get that posted.
Well, wait a minute. I believe I reviewed some minutes today that said what we wanted the search committee to be constituted of in terms of who we expected to be on the search committee.
Yep, and it included a business owner in town and a couple of
Correct.
residents. So that's
So-
what the
Correct.
advertisement would be for.
Right, so all Jenny and I are asking for is to structure some direction on what we should be putting in that ad as far as time commitments. What's the expectation
Okay.
of time
All right.
commitments?
Well-
So, go ahead.
Go ahead, Brian. I hope you have a better idea than I do.
No, so it sounds like we could probably say something along the lines of like roughly 4 group meetings to take place between January and April 2024. I feel like if we could even get people together in December, that would make me a little bit more comfortable timing wise, but that might just be pushing it.
Yeah, I'd like to see the notice go out as soon as it can. So I'm fine with what Brian said. And I don't want to put too many handcuffs on the committee. Let them decide how often they want to meet. And when it is, and let them come up with their own timeline. I'm not going to prescribe it. Otherwise, they lose their independence, and it's why join that if I'm not going to actually be able to speak up. The committee will meet sometime the first week in January, and the target date for completion is the beginning of April.
Okay, that would be great. John, do you think that's a workable schedule?
Yeah, so basically, we're probably looking at interviews to meet the schedule you're looking for, I would be hoping we can be looking for interviews in the late February, March timeframe. Because we need, once the interviews happen, we need 3 weeks to do reference and background checks on candidates. So if we put everything together and get it advertised, either, mid-December to early January and have a 1-month advertising period, that means we should have all the candidates submitted by February 1st. And that's, I think, what we're looking at is a February timeframe for the committee to really be doing its work. So that we can make that deadline, of having finalists to the select board. So we'll work with the committee on that, but I think that's a doable timeframe. But you're looking at more of the committee doing its work in more of a compressed period, because they need to choose who the select board will interview as finalists. That's the role of the screening committee, is to select candidates for the board to interview. So I think we're looking at really a January, February timeframe for that to occur.
So from early January to the end of February, so roughly a 2-month timeframe.
Yeah, I think that's more of the timeframe you're looking at here for the screening committee's role.
Okay.
And to address Jenny's concerns, we're asking to see how big the pool is at the end of November. If we sign the contract in mid-November, we've got a couple of weeks to then get out more specific detail to those people to see if there's anything that would make them want to withdraw their interest. We can provide. We've got a couple of weeks to provide possible candidates with the information they need to whether or not they want to continue, and give them more specific information before the December meeting.
I do have another question too, if I may. The vote at the last meeting had some prescribed members on the committee. And I'm just wondering what the plan is if I reach out to those individuals and they aren't particularly interested or able to participate in the committee.
Well, I don't know
Like the town moderator, the chair of the planning board. It was very specific to who would be on without vetting their interest first.
I guess ask them, and if that doesn't work out, we'll address it at the next meeting. Stan, Brian, do you have any other suggestions?
No, just let's chat and see if they're willing and able.
I don't have any suggestions.
See if they're willing to make the commitment, and if I'm sure if they turn it down, I'm sure they'll have good reasons. But if that contingent of people doesn't work out, we'll change the composition at the next meeting.
All right, so we can have the notice in next week's paper.
That would be great. That would be great. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Petrin? All right, thank you very much, sir. If
All right,
you,
thank
so
you
we
to the
need a
board. I
motion.
appreciate the confidence, and I look forward to our firm looks forward to working with all of you to replace Mr. Lowe. And strong words to say replace Mr. Lowe, but I look forward to working with you.
Thank you. We need a motion to authorize the town administrator to work on a contract with Community Paradigm Associates.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
All right, roll call. Stan?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
I'm a yes also. All right, thank you, Mr. Petrin.
Thanks, John.
Next is to consider a recommendation from the town planner for the appointment of Kristen DeJohn as a full member of the Economic Development Committee. I don't know if there are any questions or comments about this appointment.
Advertise?
Could I have a motion?
Yes, it
Was this advertised?
Yes.
Okay, I'm fine with it. I'll make a motion, we approve the appointment of Kristen John as a full member.
Second,
All right, roll call, Brian,
yes.
Dan,
Yes,
I'm a yes also. Next, approve bills and payroll warrants W 24-08 and W 24-08A. Do I have a motion?
so moved.
Second,
Roll call, Brian,
yes.
Dan,
Yes,
I'm a yes. And Jenny, we have some minutes?
We do. I have two sets, however, I didn't allow for enough time for the September 28th minutes, and I don't know if you, Bob, have had a chance to review those.
I did not.
Okay, so I'll hold those till the next meeting. So I have the minutes of October 12th with changes, and I'll share those.
Jenny, we have to come in and sign that conservation document, right? All three of us?
Correct. Yep, and I did just write to Mr. Gaffney because I noticed in the revised signature page, he had Stan listed as the chair and not you, so I've asked him. So I have edited it with pen and it's there for signing, but I've also asked him for clean copies, so
Okay.
I don't know how quickly you want to rush in or not. So let me find my share button.
Okay.
And the changes were very small. Just there and there.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of October 12th as amended?
so moved.
Second,
Roll call, Stan,
Yes,
Brian,
yes.
I'm a yes also. Did we have another set?
No, the other set was the September 28th, but
Okay,
I'll hold those for the next meeting.
all right, thank you. All right, that's it. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second,
Roll call, Stan,
Yes,
Brian,
yes.
and I'm a yes also. All right, Jenny and Don, thank you.
Right, it's
Thank
getting
you.
really quiet at that airport.
Actually, they're just getting to the good groove music, so I might stay here a little bit longer.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Good
Time for
night.
the record is 8:19.